You know, we had an experiment where we could somehow just give every kid a shot in the arm and kind of make them an adult decision maker. Then it would be very easy.
You give the money to the kid.
We would have a voucher system, and we'd hand the money to the kid, and the kid would act in their own self-interest to pick the school where they fit best and they learn the most, etc. But without that magic shot in the arm, we have to hand the voucher, if we're going to have a voucher system or a charter, we have to hand the decision-making rights to the parent.
Well, be careful. I mean, the other thing I would stress, though, is that under the current system, you're handing that voucher to somebody.
Right.
You're handing it to Chicago Public Schools.
You're handing it to a government bureaucrat.
Yeah, yes.
So what I'm saying is,
you don't avoid that problem.
We probably both agree that taking some of the decision-making authority out of the hands of the bureaucrats and putting it in the hands of the parents is a good thing. Yes. But what I'm saying is, when we want to talk about the optimal system and we want to answer the question, well, why don't we just have vouchers? The reason that we want to start with vouchers and then say, how would we build upon vouchers to make a simple voucher system better? The answers to all of those considerations revolve around the fact that we're giving it to the parent and not to an adult decision maker.
Well, let's be careful. So let's say somebody's going to have to decide. And somebody's going to have to decide what choices of schools people have.
Right.
Somebody's going to have to decide, because we're not going to give it to the kid. We've established that we're not, 6-year-olds are not going to be choosing. Right. They may help decide by telling this decision maker what they want, but we're not going to give them decision-making authority.
Right. And we both have enough children to know that that wouldn't have been a good idea.
I agree. So we're going to give somebody else as a proxy the decision-making rights. Secondly, we've already decided that we're, at least for some families, we're going to help them pay for it.
Right.
We're going to fund it.
Right.
And we're going to take the rights of decision-making and give them to somebody other than the kid.
Right.
Okay. Logical choices might be the parents. Another logical choice might be somebody outside the family who's going to presumably, hopefully, act on the interest of the child.
And represent the taxpayer as an agent to make sure the money goes for the child's education.
Yes. Okay. So one of the things we wouldn't want people to be able to do would be to divert the resources to something else.
Right.
To make it another activity and call it education.
Right.
Okay, so we'd like to make sure it's actually spent on educating the kid. It's still, though, the question of what choices will whoever's making the decisions have.
Right.
Will the running of the schools be done by the government? Will there be school choice? So even if it was no voucher system, if I told you, you can go to whatever school you want. You can go to a suburban school, even though you live in the city of Chicago. You're willing to drive to the suburbs, you have the right to go there.
And also, what consequences do those choices have for the people who are the educators?
Yep.
Because one of the things I discovered writing this book that I didn't know was that even in Chile, which is held up as they did vouchers, they really didn't. The first 20 years at least, if the municipal schools were failing because people were fleeing them and going to the private schools, and the federal government wasn't giving the municipal schools enough money to stay open because they didn't have students and their voucher income was falling and they couldn't cover the fixed cost, a lot of the municipalities took local government money and propped up the publicly run schools. So even in Chile, which is held up as this, they really had competition, they actually didn't. They had competition for the private providers, and they had, we'll cover your losses if you lose competition for the public providers.
Well, you got to be careful. There's competition in terms of the consumer side. The consumers get to choose where they go.
Right.
the supply side, again, we got to distinguish between the demand side and the supply side. You're saying we didn't really have a competitive market on the supply side. You didn't require the providers to cover their cost.
Right.
They could be subsidized providers. We were willing to subsidize public providers.
Which, in terms of what we were talking about before, the menu that the parents got to choose from in Chile was probably not as good as it could have been if you hadn't subsidized these lower performing schools.